Good afternoon. We are continuing our program of the European Learning and Teaching Forum 2021, still from our respective offices, homes, or wherever we are at the moment. It is lovely to have you so numerous around Europe, or perhaps, and probably also beyond Europe. This is the second session. We had a good starting session, which I hope provoked many ideas among the participants who took part in it. But now we're moving on to another topic, because as you may have noticed, we are looking at the sustainability from different perspectives. Typically, when we do talk about sustainability, we also end up referring to, at one point or another, to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And in this session, we will have several case studies showing us how the universities are working towards achieving them. Before we go to the topic, a few practicalities. This session is being recorded and it will be available, like all the other forum sessions, on EUA YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you type European University Association, you will find all our videos there. All of those who have registered for the forum, like those who are listening to me live at the moment, you will also receive after the forum a link to all the recordings of the forum sessions. We have speakers lined up for the session, but we do hope to hear from you as well. You have some ways to connect with us and interact with us. First of all, there is a chat box where you can put greetings and make any technical remarks. For instance, if you're not hearing me, of course you don't hear this advice if you're not hearing me. But anyway, technical remarks there, and also other remarks, for instance, explaining what you do in your institution if you want to share it with other participants. Then there is a Q&A tab also on the right side of your screen. And there you should put the questions to the speakers, and the chair will be picking up those questions that are most voted in that tab. So you can vote on the questions your colleagues or fellow participants have put in the Q&A section. So if you think they're relevant, give them a little thumbs up. And then we do have handouts section as well, where you can find the program booklet and some of the program booklet, which will give you further information about the presentations as well as of the different sessions. This is where I will finish, and I leave the floor to the chair of the session, the member of our Learning and Teaching Steering Committee at EUA from the University of Bucharest, Romita Iucus. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tia. And it's indeed a huge pleasure for me to chair this second session dedicated to a very generous topic, which will be linked to the teaching towards sustainable development. And I have the pleasure here to introduce in a few words what is so important from the perspective of aiming this session in terms of inspiration and implementing environmental and sustainability education in the context of global efforts to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. From the perspective of what our special guests will share with you, I have the pleasure to introduce 4 speakers for this session. The first is Pascal Frank from the UFANA University of Lüneburg University Group of United Kingdom. John Barino from the University College Cork, Ireland, will be the third guest speaker for our and Sana Kivimäki from the Tampere University, Finland, will introduce you for the first presentation. Now it's time to introduce the first speaker, which is Pascal Frank. He's a doctoral research fellow at the Faculty of Sustainability at the UFANA University of Lüneburg. He received his education at Fern University Hagen, Germany, and University of Fribourg, Switzerland, and in Cambridge University, UK. Pascal Frank draws upon a variety of self-reflection learning activities and practice and combines them with a training in mainly qualitative research. Now, Pascal will share with us personal approaches towards sustainability, a new agenda for environmental and sustainability education. Pascal, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Romita. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Pascal Frank. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Leuphana University of Lüneburg, and in collaboration with some colleagues, I'm currently elaborating a concept called personal approaches towards sustainability, which we conceive as a new agenda for environmental and sustainability education, in brief, ESE. So the concept responds to a somewhat paradoxical trend. More specifically, the literature shows that ESE learning activities have been globally introduced into basically all levels of education. Knowledge on sustainability-related problems has significantly increased throughout the last decades, and also the perceived importance of the vision of sustainability has increased among society. Yet, at the same time, sustainability-related problems have even exacerbated throughout the last decades, and partly because individual behaviors have not really changed. What surprises most is that even individuals who explicitly express sustainability-related values and their willingness to act upon these overall do not act differently in comparison to others. And for this reason, it has been argued that current ESE scholarship and practice is insufficient for preparing individuals to engage with the cause of a sustainable future. As part of an explanation, some sustainability scholars have recently criticized that current ESE scholarship and practice almost exclusively deals with unsustainability and potential solutions in terms of external phenomena, such as ecosystems, social economic structures, or technological innovations. In addition, the envisaged learning outcomes of current ESE practices are characterized by a strong focus on cognitive intellectual competencies, such as analyzing, evaluating, or assessing, which has also been criticized. What current ESE scholarship and practice widely neglects, in contrast, are inner or personal dimensions of sustainability. That is to say, learners' own bodily sensations, emotions, needs, or sensory sensations. In particular, they ignore the emotional burden that a confrontation with unsustainability, as well as active engagement with the vision of sustainability entails. And analogously, learners' subjective well-being and their ability to deal with their inner states and processes remain widely ignored as learning outcomes of ESE. As a consequence, in current ESE scholarship and practice, the learner is commonly detached from sustainability-related problems, and the focus on cognitive intellectual competencies somewhat suggests that their solution is only a matter of right thinking. It neglects what, for example, O'Brien has called the personal, in contrast to the practical and political sphere of transformation. Yet it is this personal sphere, that is to say people's inner world, which, for example, Abson et al. Have described as the deepest leverage point for a sustainability transformation, and can in fact best be accessed through education. And this is where the personal approaches come into play. Personal approaches toward ESE put the subjective experience of the individual at the center of learning activities. They are rooted in the strong conviction that we do not only intellectually connect to sustainability-related problems, but we are in fact concerned and touched by these problems as thinking, feeling, and embodied human beings. And therefore, if we want to prepare ourselves for the present challenges of our time, we need to consciously connect to the experiences that prompt in us, particularly those that are emotionally stressful and difficult to bear. In line with the pedagogical assumptions of experiential learning, the idea behind personal approaches is that through the conscious unfolding of and engagement with our subjective experience, we develop the intrapersonal competence to better deal with the challenges of unsustainability. And this intrapersonal competence acquisition, in turn, allows for an inner transformation, eventually enabling us to relate to the cause of sustainability in a different and more constructive way. When developing specific learning activities following a personal approach toward ESE, it is useful to differentiate between different ways in which individuals relate to sustainability-related problems and the vision of sustainability. As shown on this slide, in our working group, we have distinguished 4 types of such relations, resulting in distinct types of subjective experiences. We call the first dimension experiencing unsustainability, in which learners explore their inner states and processes when confronted with sustainability-related problems. And the second dimension, inner manifestations of unsustainability, learners inquire into the inner features that make them reproduce unsustainable practices. Inner sustainability is the third dimension. Exploring inner sustainability means to focus on what learners need for their personal need satisfaction and mental and physical well-being. The individual as change maker towards sustainability finally describes the dimension in which learners explore their subjective experiences in their professional role as change agents. Distinguishing these dimensions of sustainability-related subjective experience is useful to specify outcomes of personal ESE activities. For example, many people experience anxiety when being faced with the threats of climate change. And if they feel unable to deal with this anxiety, they are likely to engage in psychological coping mechanisms, such as suppressing information related to climate change. In a personal approach toward ESE, you would intentionally evoke such states and make people aware of them. At the same time, you would provide learning activities that help them building the emotional resilience to deal with anxiety, eventually allowing them to constructively engage with climate change while fully feeling the threats associated with it. So summing up, I argue that personal approaches toward ESE might be the missing piece to unleash ESE's potential to contribute to a sustainability transformation. It systematically addresses the so far neglected inner worlds of learners, thereby accessing deepest leverage point for transforming society. Obviously, personal approaches are very much in their infancy, and while there have been some scattered approaches in this regard, much more ESE scholarship and practice is needed to specify both personal learning outcomes and activities. Nevertheless, I hope that the concept of personal approaches toward ESE can be a starting point for such inquiries. These endeavors will certainly require new bridges in transdisciplinary research and teaching, linking ESE, for example, to fields such as psychotherapy and coaching, movement sciences, or contemplative science and practice. So coming to the last slide, if you want to know more about the personal approaches, please check out my longer presentation on the L&T Forum YouTube channel, linked in the handout section. A specific application as well as learning effects of a seminar applying the principles of personal approaches can also be found. And I uploaded a list of corresponding literature on the field. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or critique, or if you are interested in collaborating on this field, do not hesitate to get in touch with me.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for a wonderful and interesting presentation. You already got a question on the Q&A section, but I'll keep it later a little bit when we're starting the session for questions and answers. Thank you very much, Pascal, again. And now I have the pleasure to introduce the second speaker, which is Caroline Wilson. She's bringing together research and teaching perspective to the task of refreshing and enhancing the curriculum at the Coventry University Group. Her research focuses on institutional teacher and students' rivers and barriers to students' engagement and how to create greater equity and opportunity for all learners. That's very interesting, Caroline, to listen to you about finding our place in the world with the Sustainable Development Goals. And now the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today, everyone. This presentation shares the experiences of the Coventry University Group in delivering a programme to embed learning about the Sustainable Development Goals into every course. I'll talk through the approach we've taken, how it integrates with other capabilities that our future leaders are going to need, and as a result, how it broadens and deepens students' learning experiences. It's presented by myself, Caroline Wilson, from the Curriculum 2025 team, but it is a co-production with two teaching colleagues, Jalea Bello and Luda Ruddock. So what is Curriculum 2025? Curriculum 2025 is a package which results from an investigation into the likely future for our graduate students and the skills, aptitudes and capabilities they'll need in an uncertain future. And that very much reflects some of the concerns that were mentioned in the opening session earlier this afternoon. You'll notice that some of the attributes on screen align with those that the EUA is also focusing on, specifically equity and inclusion and employability. So embedding the SDGs alongside other themes, we think, gives us opportunities to help students see connections. So for instance, the SDGs are opportunities for co-creation of learning. In terms of decolonisation at the bottom of the screen, when we're thinking about the future world we want, we can examine whose future is prioritised and whose knowledge is preferred as offering solutions. And I suppose finally, what could present a more authentic assessment topic than the challenges whose achievement is essential to humanity's future? Our approach also primes both students and staff to address the size of the challenge, recognising that at this time, according to Sachs and colleagues, only deep transformational challenges which achieve the SDGs in parallel are likely to deliver the goals. An example of one of these transformations is sustainable cities, which is at roughly 7 o'clock on this graphic. It shows how many of the SDGs need to work in parallel to overhaul how we live in cities, which are home to half of the humans on the planet and 70% of economic output. To help our teaching colleagues, we have mapped our courses to the transformations most likely to be relevant to their subjects. And we've also tried to identify a series of topical issues that courses might focus on. And you can see a few of those here on the screen. One of the biggest enablers to this work is to have teaching colleagues who want to act as champions of teaching and learning about the SDGs. Luda Ruddock teaches a Promoting Healthy Communities module and has challenged her students to find solutions to a growing ageing population and the need for age-friendly citizen settings. The learning that is provided deepens students' understanding of the contribution they can make to the future and develops a sense of agency. It also provides an authentic real-world challenge that fosters transformative learning. Another colleague, Jalea Bello, runs an annual challenge for students across the business and law faculty. A hackathon is a marathon-intensive session for creating solutions to problems. The 24-hour SDGs hackathon saw students in Coventry working via live links alongside students from countries across the globe. The slide shows last year's event. This spring, the focus is on sustainable cities and will engage both employers and those governing the cities of the participating universities. So one of the questions we were asked to address was about replication in other settings. Our way of conceptualizing achieving the SDGs as a series of big challenges is flexible and adaptable, as can be seen by the fact that we've been able to map them to all of the course types at Coventry, which is a large UK university. The two practice examples I've just taken you through very quickly, the public health course and the hackathon, involved online collaboration with students in other countries, and that illustrates the exercise is equally applicable to other nations. Online is, of course, more accessible and more achievable as a result of COVID, and has immense potential to bring students together to gain a real understanding of other perspectives, cultures, and ways of living. Two other drivers that have been very helpful have been key staff and also students. I mentioned earlier how valuable it is to have colleagues to champion the teaching of SDGs. Students have also made it clear they want this teaching. We have some valuable metrics from the National Union of Students. Their biannual survey has shown that 82% of Coventry students want to learn about sustainable development. And this is a very helpful, persuasive statistic to encourage teaching staff to find the time to make the changes in their curricula. This has been especially challenging over the last year due to the added pressures of COVID, of course. So we've got a lot to do to see the SDGs in every single course at the university, but we are making progress. An independent external audit in 2020 noted the impact in the 18 months since work began, and reviewers noted that it was an excellent approach to embedding sustainability learning holistically across the entire formal curriculum. That's a very brief summary. Thank you. I look forward to your questions, but now I'm going to hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation, Caroline. And now I have the pleasure to introduce the next speaker, John Barimo. His current project is creating and curating digital resources to support teaching staff with the integration of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, John is introducing us in the dynamic and contextualized framework for integrating the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals across the learning landscape. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My heartfelt greetings wherever you are right now, and for this opportunity to speak today as well, and for the forum to have this platform. I have the honor of speaking for a transdisciplinary team that has been working with sustainability at UCC for well over a decade, and it's from the upper administration down to the teaching staff. I'm trying to get the next slide. Oh, there, thank you. So I'm just going to give you a small window into the sustainability journey and a little bit of a taste and a flavor of this this toolkit for the SDGs. And it really began in earnest with an evaluation that was performed, and a very comprehensive evaluation by the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. And it's called the Gold Star Award. And we were the first university in Europe to be awarded this. And although the honor is great, what it really did provide us is with a gap analysis. It informed us that in areas of innovation or campus engagement, we did very well. But in terms of coverage of the SDGs in the curriculum, that was one of our lower scores. And so it gave us a challenge, and it showed us where our opportunity was. And with that, we found out that, you know, our modules or our learning units are covering all 17 of the SDGs. And this is what's represented in the graphic on the left, where the 17 SDGs is the outer ring, and the inner ring is the number of modules that we're addressing at the SDGs. And may I remind you that SDGs are a very comprehensive, broad view of sustainability, which to me is about the sustainability of our civilization into the future. So 61% of our academic departments have a sustainability course offerings, but only 6% of our modules across UCC address sustainability. And it seems like a low number, but it also, again, we had to get to the bottom of this and find out what was going on. So at the same time, UCC launched an academic strategy. And central to this, at least in priority one, which was the connected curriculum based on the University College London model with Dilly Fung, was there were 6 pillars. And sustainability was one. So this really raised the awareness of sustainability and brought it front and center to the agenda. Trans and interdisciplinarity, which I personally think are interlinked, interwoven with sustainability, especially as we start to come up with to meet the challenges. But global reach, again, community engagement, research-based teaching, all coming into play with sustainability, and also employability, which was really good to hear that first talk. And there's a presentation tomorrow on the same subject with a colleague of mine from UCC, Catherine Romani. So moving on to the next slide. So with this, armed with these two pieces of information, we secured funding from the National Forum for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning in the Higher Ed Authority, and to build an SDG toolkit. And it's an open-based resource which will be on the web, available for anybody, any institution. And the idea is to create and curate learning resources to enable staff to integrate the SDGs into their teaching and learning practices. And this, again, fits with the academic strategy of UCC. And to the right is, it is showing one of the tools that's there. But what's more important about this is the interconnectivity of the SDGs, and they must be thought of holistically, not just cherry picking one particular SDG. But in this particular image, the turquoise circles, the 5 of them, represent targets under the climate change SDG, but it shows the direct interlinkages with other SDG targets. So you can't take these in isolation, and for some reason, I don't see the slides anymore. Hello? 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 I don't see anybody. I don't hear anybody. Okay, the slides are back. Good. Okay, so I'll press on here. So part of this connected curriculum also had a self-evaluation tool, and this was thought of for reviewing existing courses and modules, but also the creations of new ones. And there are multiple sort of entry points or on-ramps to this process. And I think of it myself as sort of the novice introductory to the left, moving on to the expert to the right. And so we were seeing how sustainability is integrated, whether it's just sort of as a peripheral kind of way, conversations of sustainability, somehow related topics, moving on to the right of starting to give insights from a perspective of a discipline. So it could be green media, it could be circular economy. There's a number of great ideas that can be talked about in the context. But then sort of hitting that middle road is addressing an SDG target and looking at it interdisciplinary, because there is a strong transdisciplinary culture at UCC with the realization of none of these wicked problems are going to be solved by any one discipline operating, in isolation. So as we move more to the left, we start to see, and this is, the area that I like to see it at least get to, is to have embedded into learning outcomes, that having it be a part of the assessment, for us to be really saying to the students, this is important enough for us to be grading you on it and considering this to be a learning objective. And then if we move all the way to the right at this expert level, now we're getting into having community partners who may be having their own challenges of trying to incorporate sustainability into their practices, and then moving on into sort of having action-oriented pedagogies. And again, transformative learning being the key to this. Next slide, there we go. So an initial phase of this was conducting focus sessions with faculty or with teaching staff and with students. And I heard quite a good cross-section of the faculty at different levels. And I found many of them really are assessing the addressing the SDGs indirectly or even directly, but just not really signposting it, not having it part of the learning outcomes, not having it even being part of the course description. So, helping them find ways to signpost and to have that big picture moment at the beginning of a semester about how this particular learning unit fits in to the greater world. The SDGs are a perfect vehicle for this. Again, talking large and then bringing it down to the focus of the discipline of a particular SDG. They're looking for ease of use. There's so many layers and so many demands put on the staff that many are just looking for something plug and play, something just to put right in. And these are short videos and just background case studies, even bulleted PowerPoint have been asked for. But the ones who are more established and the champions, they're looking for databases to build stronger assignments, ideas for group projects. And again, it came back to this idea of some of these large problems that are transdisciplinary, like COVID. They don't just touch one SDG, human migration, climate change, a myriad of SDGs involved. So the students now, with their perspective, right off the bat, the first thing was practical. They want genuine. They want real world. And they want to address issues like climate change, global warming, and biodiversity loss and issues like this. So they're looking for this, and I could get that sense of climate anxiety speaking with them. Group projects, fair assessments, and also learning artifacts. They want something that they can turn around and put onto social media that is speaking what they really believe in, not just going in a recycle bin. So from this came an idea. Let's see. I'm trying to advance this slide, but I don't see the feature there for that. But just putting together a bit of a model of empowering students, and that's what's really core to this. Action-oriented outcomes to the end result is something to share. I'll just say that a lot of our students are already involved in this because we have the Friday Future students among us now, and they're politically active, they're civically engaged, but it's really helping them focus and really turn and empower and be change agents in the world. Next slide, please. And I'd just like to bring this back to something that we probably all remember back a long time ago, Bloom's taxonomy. And most of us are speaking to that cognitive domain in the classrooms. And this is where, I really appreciated Pascal's talk because it got at this, because the affective domain really needs to be addressed. Values, right? Building empathy, building emotional intelligence. And the psychomotor is exactly what they're asking for is practical. So next slide, please. And when you start looking into the, can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, just finishing up here, is that in the ESD literature, there's this idea, bringing this all together of hand, heart, and head, really bringing the whole person into play to really have that empathy to change. And I'd just like to say thank you for the moment here. And again, these are the students we have right now, and they really are an inspiration of hope for me because they really are trying to seek positive change in the world. Thank you. And I'm frozen. Okay. So thank you. I'm not sure if that was frozen.
Thank you very much, John, for your presentation. I think you were not frozen. I think it was the rest of us, and I see that our chair froze. So that's why I'm jumping in as a backup here. So thank you, John, and we will move on to the next one. We will hear from Sanna Kivimäki about approaching sustainability in diverse ways in Tampere University. So I will keep this very short. So Sanna, I will give you the floor. You have the challenge of being the last speaker in this session.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me and see me. I've been having some problems with the connection as well. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanna Kivimäki, and I will be telling you about how we approach the subject of sustainable development in learning and teaching in our university. And this is a co-presentation with our Innovation Director, Taru Pilvi, who is also here online. In case you have questions for her, she can answer in the chat. So our university was formed in the beginning of 2019 when two universities, the University of Tampere and Tampere University of Technology, were merged. So it's a fairly new university, only 2 years old, and it is the second largest university in Finland. Our university consists of 7 faculties, and it is a multidisciplinary university. We have about 20,000 students. And together with Tampere University of Applied Sciences, we form Tampere University Community. In our university strategy, our purpose is defined that we work together to build a sustainable world. We believe that to achieve this in teaching and learning, sustainability should be approached in diverse ways and with many kinds of actions to get a profound impact. This way, all the students can choose the way how they want to learn about sustainable development, as well as the depth of expertise in these issues. In the last 2 to 3 years, during the merge and since the merge, we have started several new multidisciplinary degree programs. 2 of these are concentrated around sustainability. So we have bachelor's degree program in sustainable urban development and a master's degree degree program in sustainable digital life. They are also both novel in the teaching methods that they use, and also in how they approach the subject, and also sustainability. So they use lots of problem-based learning and kind of multidisciplinary approach to these issues. Then, as most of the students won't be participating or studying in degree programs that are specifically targeting the issue of sustainable development, we are also integrating sustainability on the learning outcomes of all degree programs. So in the Tampere University community, which we form with the Tampere University of Applied Sciences, we have common learning outcomes. And they are competencies that every student that graduates from our university community should master. One of these common learning outcomes is international outlook and global responsibility. This means that upon graduation, the students, all our students, should, for example, orient him or herself to the future by identifying the consequences that decisions and choices that they make have for sustainable development, and also be familiar with the issues and ways of forming knowledge about sustainable development in their scientific field or other field that they are studying. And the idea in these common learning outcomes is that they are not separate courses, but all these outcomes that have been defined as these common learning outcomes should be achieved integrated in the degree program. Also, depending on the field of study, also it is possible that there is separate courses, but mainly the idea is that the learning outcomes are achieved within courses or when doing theses. We also are trying to promote sustainability through teaching methods that we use. So firstly, we have developed multidisciplinary challenge-based approaches to teaching sustainable development themes, and more precisely to teaching the skills on how to tackle real sustainability challenges in real-life organizations. One such approach has been the Innovation Challenge courses, where students from multidisciplinary backgrounds work in teams to solve challenges given by various stakeholders. Before, this approach has been used to teach business and technology-related innovation cases and design thinking. However, lately we've had cases related to sustainability challenges of startups, NGOs, and other organizations like the city of Tampere. One of the highlights of these Innovation Challenge courses is our Innovation Festival, which is a week-long event where almost 1,000 students get together and solve sustainability challenges from a wide range of stakeholders. For example, human rights activists or the Central Union of Agricultural Producers and Forest Owners. The most remarkable impact in this event comes from the fact that many of the student groups get their ideas utilized directly by the case giver organizations, or some of the student groups even end up forming a startup company of their own after the week. And also, in addition to the knowledge and information on sustainability topics on their own field, the students need to have the basic entrepreneurial skills to act as a change agent in their field of expertise. Therefore, in order to increase the understanding and skills of sustainable entrepreneurship, we have also started to offer small courses specifically on this topic. Since autumn 2019, we have also started flipped learning method as a pilot in the technical degree programs of our university. So there 500 first-year engineering students have been placed into 2 groups based on their study programs, and 250 students who study 4 engineering mathematics courses with traditional pedagogical design, for example, lectures and exercises. And the second group contains 250 students who study similar courses with flipped learning design, so self-study and workshop exercises prime time. And what the results from the first year that we did this showed that the students in both groups had similar approaches to learning in the beginning of their university studies. But when the difference was tested 4 months later, the results showed that the flipped learning group students had statistically significantly higher deep and organized approaches to learning. Also, the results imply that the flipped learning method was able to support students' quality of learning better than the traditional learning method, both before and during the pandemic. And this suggests that flipped learning method has potential in preparing students to sudden and unexpected changes that face the education system and the whole society. And I think that I may be running out of time. But in the end, I just put some questions or challenges that we have encountered on the way in these last 2 to 3 years when we have been building up this new university and our ways to promote sustainability. And I think that these are issues. If someone would have some suggestions on how to approach these, we would be happy. So first problem is how to integrate generic skills like this global responsibility and sustainability issues into degrees that are very full already. And another one is that what kind of new skills the teachers need to be able to integrate sustainability issues into their teaching. So it's not only about the students learning things, but also the teachers' knowledge and skills. Thank you. I think that this was everything from me, and like I said, if these questions, if you have some answers to them, we would be happy to hear your ideas and thoughts about them.
Thank you very much, Sana. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I'm very grateful to all speakers for presenting the content. I'm also very sorry for disappearing from this for a short period of time from the landscape, but I'm back here and I'm trying to go on for managing the session. Now it's time to kindly ask speakers to switch on the camera and to come back here. And of course, I have the pleasure to share some questions from the Q&A. And the first, it's addressed probably to Pascal with a question related to what extent, in which areas at UFANA University of Lüneburg, it's the personal approach or awareness already implemented, or how are you planning to communicate it throughout the university?
Yes, so it's Angelika, right? Thank you for the question. So for now, it's I can't say that it is sort of widely implemented at the university. There is we're currently working in a group and elaborating on this concept. And I have run several seminars applying the idea or the concept or the principles of a personal approach. And I have published on the effects and published on sort of the conceptualization of these seminars. I think I've added these in the handout section. So this is what happened right now. And some of my colleagues, for example, also in the working group, they've published similar concepts. But for now, it's really on this level of individual seminars. And so I've tried, and I've in fact worked with the dean of the faculty to develop modules in which this personal approach is sort of further developed, but this is really something that is in its infancy right now. And I also have to say that there are many resistances in this regard, because many people are still of the opinion that sort of this, dealing within our worlds doesn't have anything to do with higher education, and doesn't have anything to do with sustainability education. So luckily there are more and more publications, and there's more and more work questioning and challenging these pre-conceptualizations, but it's still quite prevailing. I would say that it's still a long way to spread personal approaches, and this is also the case at Leuphana University, I have to admit. Although there's quite an openness towards the approach, I have to say, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pascal. That's a question which is more or less linked to the idea of embedding the ESG in the course. Each speaker has spoken about teachers embedding the SDGs into their course, but how do you go about training the teachers? Our colleagues, it's just thinking about professional development as well as initial teacher training. That's a very challenging and interesting question linked to the process of development of teachers. Yeah? Would you like to
John,
start?
do you want to go first?
Yes, I would like, if you don't mind, is actually that's been a large part of what I've been working on. I didn't have time to talk about it, so I'm just anxious. And so there were workshops, and a big part of that workshop was just giving some primer to the SDGs and some background and getting them up to speed and familiar, because not everybody is trying to develop a common language too that people have, that they can communicate with each other, and doing wide varieties of groups is a very transdisciplinary floor. And then one of the first steps is to have an evaluation of your own module or whatever you want to look at, or course of study or degree program, but mapping it individually and using that table I showed earlier, that yellow table of the different skill levels of where do you fit with each SDG, because there may be a primary one, there may be a few secondary ones that you're covering, but then how do we bring this message around? But also being clear that in the beginning of the semester, if you can talk about this in the framework of the, your module, in the course, in the framework of the SDGs, and then bringing it back around together. So yes, key is staff development, and right now I'm working on a sort of a micro-credential too, to extend it from an hour and a half to 30 hours. So hopefully I can get some funding for that and then move forward.
Okay. Would it help if I just elaborated on that a tiny little bit?
Yes.
Yes. So we have exactly the same kind of. We've identified that also. We work very closely with our colleagues in another department called Academic Development, in co-producing learning materials, webinars, sessions for training, and like John, we've produced a toolkit which is a curation of resources, but also ideas for what to produce at which level as you progress up. I must admit, I do envy John's diagram, and I'm having that the minute the session's over.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Anna, would you like to add?
Yeah, I could also add. We have, this is something that we have been actually kind of just thinking about. So I'm quite glad to hear that you are already having some ideas and doing things, so we can maybe take some of them on board. But we have been also kind of not only concentrating on talking with the teacher or providing support on the subject of sustainable development, but also like teaching methods, what kind of things they can do in their lectures that make the student learn the skills that they need in when solving these sustainability issues. So it's not only about the teachers teaching the subject matter of sustainability, but also teaching skills like critical thinking and problem solving and this kind of thing. So we are building this kind of information package for teachers, that what they need to know kind of about sustainability issues, but also what kind of exercises they can do that help the students to develop such skills that they are able to solve these problems. So what kind of teaching methods and exercises you can use in the courses. This has been one thing that we are just building up now.
Thank you very much, Sana. Thank you. There are any other interventions from the speaker side? Then I will pass to the next question, a very interesting one, which is linked to the critical attitude to the SDGs? What about the critical attitude to the SDGs, not only implementing, but being critical and develop students' critical thinking concerning their content and how they were developed? This was the questions, and if you like to start to answer, you will be welcome. Caroline, would you like to start?
Yeah, well, I suppose a very quick example I gave at the beginning was linking it with decolonization and challenging the SDGs and who has the power and whose future, whose ideal future are we looking for, and whose knowledge is superior in terms of delivering us the future that we want. Just really unpacking those things, I think, is a really important part of delivering the SDGs. It's not just a functional, let's get all of these SDGs delivered. It is that questioning of, where the power lays.
Thank you, Caroline. Pascal, would you like to add something on this issue?
Well, I find it, in fact, somewhat difficult to answer, especially in terms of the background I provided, the personal approaches. So there's one thing. So maybe I start from this point. So in the seminars, when developing the personal approaches, there are basically two lines of doing so. So one is in the practical sphere, that is sort of by trying to get into some form of transformation of one's actions and then observing oneself. And the other part is in terms of learning and making the experience of learning about sustainability. And this is interesting insofar as there's so many emotional resistances we explore, so many emotional reactions that also influence the way we deal with new information. And this is particularly important, I find, when talking about sustainability-related topics, because they are often associated with strong emotions. After all, when we talk about climate change, that's really an existential threat to humanity, and that's quite logical that we react in an emotional way to it. And so, in order to develop a critical attitude, what I think is important is first and foremost develop sort of this resilience to really face these threats and face the issue, and from there sort of make sort of embodied decisions and make sort of embodied reasoning processes. Being able to integrate different perspectives is really requires an emotional capacity, and that's what I would suggest is needed also to develop students' critical thinking abilities.
Thank you very much, Pascal. That's a very interesting perspective on this issue of critical thinking. Following the questions, that's another one which is linked to what pedagogy now is just opening and creating as an important point, is linked to the curriculum. And the question is, what role has co-design of curriculum between students and staff played in the development of embedding of the SDG in the curriculum? It was an open question to anyone, but in particularly to Caroline.
Shall I go first then?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we try and do is encourage students to be there in the kind of governance of the course, as well as in the being recipients of the course. So we have students take part in the curriculum design phases. So like Sana, we use the sprint process. Everybody gets together and redesigns a course, and students are there as part of that, alumni and current students, as well as employers. So we have them at that stage. They're also part of the annual review. So when everybody sits down together and reviews the course at the end of the year, there's student input there. But we are very aware that even though those students are paid for their time, there can be quite a burden on students to be looking after the course for the benefit of the people who come behind, because they've already experienced the course by that stage. So we employ student interns within Curriculum 2025, and they're paid as members of staff to help us give that student experience, that student perspective on learning, and they help us design learning materials, help guide us to the types of exercise that we do. They're a full part of the team, looking at every single aspect with us, and that's really, really useful.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's a very insightful answer to the question. Is anybody else who would like to add something on this matter? John?
I think to that matter is why we brought in the student voice into the focus sessions for the SDG toolkit, just to hear what they wanted and what they felt they needed to develop themselves and to develop sustainability literacy and have that feeling to move forward and to be active in the world. And right now we're also starting a project to work through the Green Campus programs across Ireland. There's a network, and to have get the student voice in a co-creation process of having the staff, having the students, and then bringing the two together in a 3-part series. So it's very important, I think.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Okay, there are no other inputs on this question. I will try to follow the next question, which is, of course, it's surrounded by the compliment. It was very interesting. Our colleague is appreciating the presentation. And she's kindly asking you to provide some examples of how personal approaches can be embedded in teaching. That's very interesting to find out some ways for transferring to the teaching processes. Pascal has to open the micro. Thank you so much.
Yes, so I have provided a list of literature in the handout section. There you can check out this literature, and then I also talk about this in the YouTube video. So just to make it a bit shorter here, so my experiences are based around like. So I started implementing these personal approaches by using mindfulness meditation practices. So that was really the start, and this is already quite interesting, I would say, especially in the context of higher education for many students, because it really connects them to things that are going on within them, and it is really uncommon, and it makes them it's in the beginning for many it's a bit uncomfortable even to sort of express and make it subject to teachings, but this is, I would say, it is certainly a good element to integrate personal approaches in the sense of making students aware of inner worlds. So one thing I really made good experiences with, and it was sort of part of my PhD project, was a concept which I call self-inquiry based learning. So that is really a way to systematically focus on inner worlds within a university context and a higher education context, and combining the experience of inner worlds with scientific approaches, so to say. And here the idea is that so you basically choose some sort of action, or it could also be some sort of transformation. So, for example, I often run a seminar in which students choose a transformational project, often like of their consumer behavior. So they come and they choose the project, and then they have to define why it is a contribution to sustainability, etc., etc. But the whole topic and the whole content of the seminar is then that they inquire, systematically observe what is happening to them while putting the project into practice. and they observe challenges, they observe what helps them, and it is accompanied by systematic self-observational training. So the training is, again, based on mindfulness meditation practices. It is also inspired by aspects of nonviolent communication, and then there's a method called microphenomenological interview and analysis by Claire Petit-Mangin, which is sort of a systematic interview training to observe in like subjective experience. And all these practices are integrated in the coursework and support students in making their self-observations. They write diaries, and at the end of the seminar, they gather in groups, and then they apply like scientific methods to analyze their own diaries. And by this, they develop an intersubjective understanding of their subjective experience. And by this, they sort of combine the scientific training, like methodological training, in like data collection and data analysis, with this self-observation and dealing with sort of inner worlds. Yeah, that's in short the approach.
Thank you very much for this very generous answer to the question. Is there any other intervention? Caroline?
I'd just add that as well as the thinking about the students' choices, which I absolutely agree with, we also try and think about personal needs structurally. So one of the things that we've discovered during COVID in learning online and offline is that does enable a student to self-pace a lot more. So we're trying to incorporate a student's life and thinking about their pressures and where they live and how they live and whether they're working as well. So that personalizing also means being able to respond to those different personal needs.
Thank you. Another question, another challenge. What type of education would qualify as ESE? Are there any criteria you can apply to identify such programs? If so, does it cover content and pedagogy? It's a very interesting challenge in order to open the floor to the new pedagogy linked to higher education needs and challenges. What do you think, my colleagues? Sana, would you like to add something on this topic?
Well, I don't know if I have an answer, but we are kind of trying to approach this in, like I said, in many ways. That on the other hand, you have this this matter of the content, but then on the other hand, also the skills that you need to teach the students and the pedagogy that we are using. So we are kind of trying to approach it in many ways. So on the other parts and in the other degree programs, we are kind of maybe concentrating more on the pedagogical side and other things, and then in other programs maybe more on the content, because also it is a pretty big task to kind of change all of these things. So we are trying to approach it from many different angles. But the 2 degree programs, for example, that I mentioned, the new degree programs that we have that are kind of deal with the issue of sustainability, they have been also, because they are new programs, they have been designed also in such a way that the pedagogy, what is done and how the teaching is delivered also kind of supports the subject on hand. So yeah, I think that we are trying to get these kind of new degree programs that approach it from all the possible ways. So they deal with sustainability and the pedagogy and the teaching methods and everything relate to sustainability, but then with maybe some other degree programs where they are kind of not starting from zero. You need to kind of take it slowly and maybe one step at a time. So I don't think that I can answer this, but this is our approach, that we are kind of trying to do many things at the same time, and also a little bit to see what works and what doesn't work. And now, for example, with this flipped learning, we have found that it helps, especially in this situation now with this pandemic. It has been a very, very good way to keep the students engaged in the studies. So we are now expanding that. So it is also, at least in our university, a little bit of trying different things and seeing what works. But we don't at least have any kind of specific criteria for things when.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really answer the question, I think.
Thank you very much, Sanna. There is probably no answer to this question, because pedagogy, it's a larger chapter on the higher education studies, and that's very important just to open new ways for approaching this topic. Thank you very much. Is there any other answer to this question? That was a question, I'm so sorry, linked to the idea of how convince the trained teachers to be very that challenges themselves to embedded sustainability in their courses. It's a question related to the process of training of trainers, but in this case, it's not about trainers, it's about university professors. What do you think about the process of training and educating university professors? Caroline?
I'm slightly struggling. If I'm struggling, it's because I'm not quite sure how that differs to the question we answered earlier about how do we train the teachers. Maybe it's a phraseology in the terms of who's a professor and who's a teacher. I mean, my own limited experience is that the whole nature of being an academic, whatever you call yourself, is to be constantly learning. And I think we are, as a breed, getting more aware of the need to be more interdisciplinary, and the need to incorporate wider subjects, and the need to incorporate wider issues for a very uncertain future. So unless the question is different to professors being different to teachers, and I wouldn't dare suggest how professors conducted themselves, then I think the answer is, we've already slightly tried to cover, which is training, support materials, and John's going to help me out here.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Caroline. John, the floor is yours.
Okay, I think, well, one of the things that we're also trying to do is to build a community of interest along the lines of a community of practice, but giving it a new name, right? But it's helping people share their knowledge, being a knowledge hub. Somebody has a challenge, they can voice it, but having this interactive space where people feel comfortable and safe to ask the questions, but to get support of the ones who are already there. So it's sort of a peer learning experience, but it's also, you know, allowing, sort of giving examples like Carolyn was saying, so that you're not really pushing something, but you're allowing that, you know, somebody to play to their strengths, you know. And again, I'm not going to get into, you know, the semantics of professor or instructor or teacher, but I think, you know, you've got to play to your own strengths. And if it's bringing your own research into the classroom and integrating that, extremely important, especially if it's into sustainability, those sorts of things. We even have, you know, the two professors, very different. One's a social scientist, one's a chemical engineer, but they've linked their classes together. And they're sharing assignments, and they're working jointly. So you're, again, building that transdisciplinarity and just expanding the scope of the students. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, John. That's interesting. It was a question directly addressed to you by a colleague. How do you assess which courses are connected to which SDGs? Just a very short answer, if you like, John, and we are going to completing the session.
Okay, it's actually a published method, Kingston University, where they have keyword searches, and they gave a list of keywords, and then we blast that against the course descriptions, the learning outcomes, and just so it was done that way. So it, it wasn't self-reporting, because I know if it was self-reporting, it could just be a box tick or whatever. Although we are trying to get the staff to reflect upon what they're doing themselves. But that, at least that's the way it was done this time. And it's known to be a very conservative approach too, so an undervalue.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you so much. We have another question to Caroline, and if you so kind to answer very quickly. You mentioned an independent audit. What criteria did it use to assess the complementary courses? Just a brief answer, Caroline.
Yeah, so Coventry University signs up to and is a member of Responsible Futures, which is a National Union of Students endeavour, and that involves an audit once every 2 years. And so I was at the experiencing side of that rather than the doing of the audit. And the experience for me was supply quite a lot of documentation in advance for that to be reviewed. And then the auditors did a series of focus groups and one-to-one interviews with staff and students. And they were on campus virtually this year for a good few days, going through all of the documentation, and then they came up with their responses.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I've seen another question just for a very quick answer related to the mission of the third mission of the university. Is the SDG real linked to this third mission of university? What do you think about the questions linked to the strategical perspective of our institutions? Just a very brief 1 minute answer to this question.
Very quickly, as my mic's on, yeah, we work very closely with our energy and estates manager. In fact, the Sustainable Development Goals was actually a much bigger thing for our colleagues in that department. They were ahead of the game, and so we've come along later. So yeah, it is a whole institution approach.
Thank you very much, Caroline. John, very brief answer.
Yeah. So it is, but having that top down is important because it enables a process. It gives that support. But sustainability was started at UCC as a bottom up from the students, but then also looking at that middle in kind of road of, so really, again, like Carolyn was saying, getting that whole institution moving to really be a true ecosystem.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful, dear colleagues, to you all for a wonderful commitment to answering to all questions, a lot of questions, a lot of variety of questions and perspective of approaching SDG and challenges in all academic processes. I'm very grateful also to the audience and the participants who are just sending and being very committed to the topic and giving us an opportunity to answer to the questions. And now it's time to pass the floor to Tia. Thank you so much for helping me for the entire session.
Well, thank you, Romita, for your persistence of while you were dropping out, coming back in and continuing with the task. Great job to all the speakers. I think this has given the audience ideas on how you can address the sustainable development goals and given the diversity of how to do that as well. But we are rushing forward in our forum program. We are now going to take another 15-minute break. In 15 minutes, the participants have an option of 2 different sessions. One session is based on the thematic peer group work that EUA has been doing and will be focusing on equity and inclusion, and there the participation is limited, but if you have signed up to it, definitely join it. We're going to pick your brains as participants as well. But then in this webinar environment, those of you who have registered, you have received another link to another session which tries to connect the dots. We're going to talk about how can you really provide the student, the learner, the comprehensive knowledge and skills, including the professional skills and entrepreneurial skills. So 2 very different sessions ahead of us and exciting times. So please join us in 15 minutes and have a cup of coffee or tea before that, and so that you are refreshed. Thank you very much.